The transport ship Vindication shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its massive hull groaning under the stress of deceleration. Deep within its armored belly, in a section marked only with warning symbols that no translator could decipher, Marcus Chen sat in perfect stillness. The restraints around his wrists and ankles were made of quantum-forged titanium, each link capable of holding a rampaging Corvan berserker. They seemed almost laughably excessive for the quiet human who hadn't moved in the past 6 hours. Marcus had learned long ago that stillness was a weapon. In the Afghan mountains, he had waited 17 hours for a single shot that changed the course of a war. In the Martian colonies, he had remained motionless for 2 days straight, watching enemy positions through his scope until the perfect moment presented itself. Now, surrounded by alien technology he barely understood and guards who spoke in clicking languages, he waited again. The cell was a marvel of galactic engineering. Force fields hummed at frequencies designed to disrupt human neural activity. The walls were made of material that could withstand antimatter explosions. Environmental controls maintained perfect atmospheric conditions while monitoring every breath, every heartbeat, every microexpression. It was a prison designed for the most dangerous criminals in known space. Marcus Chen had earned his place here. 3 years ago, the Galactic Council had made contact with Earth. Humanity had expected trade agreements, cultural exchanges, maybe some technological advancement. What they got instead was a list of demands and the polite suggestion that Earth could either comply or face the consequences. The galaxy, it seemed, had little patience for newcomers who didn't know their place. The war had lasted 8 months. Earth's combined military forces, enhanced with the best technology humanity could produce, had faced the Council's enforcement fleets. Ship for ship, weapon for weapon, the aliens had every advantage, but they had never faced anything quite like human special operations forces. Marcus had been part of the 75th Ranger Regiment before the war, then Delta Force, then something that didn't have a name because it didn't officially exist. When the aliens came, he had been recruited into an even more classified program. Project Reaper had one goal: prove that humans could not be conquered, no matter the odds. The first time Marcus had eliminated a council general, it had been dismissed as luck. A human sniper couldn't possibly penetrate the energy shields and personal armor that protected high-ranking Zephyrian officers. The second assassination had been called an anomaly. The third had caused panic in the Council's command structure. By the time Marcus had eliminated his 7th target, they had started calling him the Reaper. Not because he killed efficiently, though he did. Not because he struck without warning, though he certainly did that too. They called him the Reaper because wherever he appeared, the will to fight seemed to die in those who faced him. The transport ship shuddered again as it entered the atmosphere of Chronos 7, the Council's maximum security detention facility. Marcus felt the familiar weight of artificial gravity replacing the ship's centrifugal force. Soon he would see his new home, a place designed to hold the galaxy's most dangerous individuals until their execution, or, in rare cases, their trial. Prisoner 77 Alpha, prepare for transfer. The announcement came in perfect, unaccented English. The Council had learned human languages with the same efficiency they had learned to fear human warfare. Marcus didn't respond. Speaking was another weapon, and he had no intention of wasting ammunition. The restraints disengaged with a soft hiss, and the cell door dissolved into sparkling motes of light. 4 guards entered, each representing a different species from the Council's member worlds. A Corvan, built like a rhinoceros crossed with a gorilla, its hide covered in natural armor plates. A Zephyrian, tall and ethereal, its 4 arms ending in hands that could manipulate matter at the molecular level. A Thrakari, insected and chittering, compound eyes tracking every micro-movement. And a human. Marcus looked at his own species representative with mild interest. The man was tall, well-built, and wore the uniform of a council enforcement officer. His name tag read Peterson in both English and Galactic Standard. When their eyes met, Peterson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Marcus Chen," Peterson said, his voice carefully controlled. "Also known as the Reaper. 7 confirmed eliminations of council officials, countless military casualties, and the distinction of being the only human to successfully infiltrate a Class 5 security installation." Marcus said nothing. "You're probably wondering why I'm here," Peterson continued as the guards formed a box formation around Marcus. "Why a human would choose to work for the council that conquered our world." The transport ship's cargo bay doors opened with a grinding mechanical sound that echoed through the ship's superstructure. Beyond the opening lay Kronos 7, and Marcus got his first look at what would likely be his final destination. The prison was built into the side of a mountain, its surface dotted with defense installations that could level a city. The architecture was deliberately intimidating, all sharp angles and threatening geometry. Hover platforms moved between landing bays carved into the rock face, carrying supplies and personnel to different levels of the facility. "Some of us," Peterson said quietly, "learned that there are worse things than serving the victors." Marcus finally spoke, his voice carrying the flat tone of someone who had made peace with death long ago. "There are worse things than dying free." Peterson's expression flickered for just a moment, showing something that might have been respect or regret. Then it was gone, replaced by the professional mask of a man who had made his choices and learned to live with them. The transfer platform was a marvel of anti-gravity technology, moving smoothly through the mountain air without any visible means of propulsion. As they descended toward the prison's intake bay, Marcus observed everything with the methodical attention of a professional soldier. Guard positions, weapon emplacements, possible escape routes, structural weaknesses. Old habits died hard, even when death itself seemed inevitable. The intake bay was sterile and efficient, designed to process prisoners with maximum security and minimum delay. Marcus was scanned by devices that mapped everything from his bone density to his neural patterns. Every scar was cataloged, every old injury analyzed for potential tactical implications. The council had learned to be thorough when dealing with humans. "Remarkable," one of the technicians said to another as they reviewed the scans. "His muscle memory shows patterns consistent with weapons training across 17 different categories. Neural pathways indicate strategic thinking capability in the 99th percentile. And look at these stress indicators." "What about them?" "They're completely flat. This human shows no psychological response to captivity, interrogation, or the prospect of execution. It's as if fear simply doesn't exist in his neural architecture." Marcus was processed through a series of chambers, each more secure than the last. His clothes were replaced with a prisoner uniform that monitored his vital signs and could deliver incapacitating neural shocks if necessary. Tracking devices were implanted under his skin, each one broadcasting his location to multiple monitoring stations. His DNA was sampled and compared against galactic databases to confirm his identity. The final chamber was different from the others. Where the previous rooms had been clinical and efficient, this one felt almost ceremonial. The walls were covered in what looked like memorial plaques, each one bearing a name and a symbol Marcus didn't recognize. "The Wall of the Fallen," Peterson explained, following Marcus's gaze. "Every being who died because of your actions. Council officers, enforcement personnel, civilian administrators. The galaxy wants you to understand the scope of your crimes." Marcus studied the plaques with professional interest. Some of the names were familiar, targets he had eliminated in the course of his mission. Others were unknown, presumably casualties from the broader conflict that his actions had influenced. He felt no guilt looking at them, no more than a surgeon would feel guilt for removing a cancer. "Anything to say?" Peterson asked. Marcus turned his attention back to the human guard. How many human names would be on that wall if we hadn't fought back? Peterson had no answer for that. The final door opened onto a corridor that stretched into the mountain's heart. The walls here were different, made of some kind of crystalline material that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. The corridor was empty except for the guards and Marcus, but he could sense that they were being watched by systems he couldn't identify. Block 7, Peterson said as they walked, reserved for the most dangerous prisoners in the galaxy. War criminals, terrorists, beings who have committed crimes against entire species. You'll find the accommodations adequate but not comfortable. They passed several sealed doorways, each one marked with symbols that indicated the nature of the prisoner within. Marcus noted security measures at each door, the way the guards' attention shifted as they moved past certain cells. Even here, in the galaxy's most secure facility, some prisoners were considered more dangerous than others. His cell was at the end of the corridor, behind a door that looked like it belonged on a battleship rather than a prison. Peterson input a code that was 27 digits long, submitted to a DNA scan, and spoke a passphrase in what sounded like ancient Corvan. Only then did the door begin to cycle open. "Home sweet home," Peterson said, though there was no humor in his voice. The cell was larger than Marcus had expected, perhaps 20 feet square with a ceiling high enough that he couldn't touch it even jumping. The walls were the same crystalline material as the corridor, providing a soft, steady illumination that never varied. A sleeping alcove was carved into one wall, with a simple bed that looked surprisingly comfortable. A small table and chair occupied one corner, while another corner held basic hygiene facilities. But it was the fourth corner that drew Marcus's attention. There, barely visible in the crystal wall's glow, were marks scratched into the surface. Tallies, maybe, or some kind of code. Someone had been here before him, someone who had found a way to mark the seemingly unmarketable walls. "Your predecessor," Peterson said, noticing Marcus's focus. "A Thrakari war leader who held out against a council siege for 3 years. When they finally captured him, he spent 6 months in this cell before his execution. He left those marks using his own claws, wearing them down to bone stumps in the process." Marcus examined the marks more closely. They weren't random scratches or simple tallies. There was a pattern, a deliberate arrangement that suggested meaning. The Thrakari had been trying to communicate something, leave some kind of message for whoever came after him. "What did he say?" Marcus asked. Peterson paused in the doorway, his hand on the door controls. The translation was never completely clear, but the best our xenolinguists could manage was something like, "The silence speaks loudest when the galaxy listens." The door sealed behind Peterson with a sound like a vault closing. Marcus was alone for the first time in days, surrounded by technology designed to hold him until the council decided his fate. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the scratches on the wall, trying to understand what the Thrakari war leader had been trying to say. Outside his cell, he could hear the subtle sounds of the prison's operation. Ventilation systems, power conduits, the distant hum of force fields and security devices. Chronos 7 was a living thing, constantly monitoring and adjusting itself to maintain perfect control over its inhabitants. Marcus lay back on the bed and closed his eyes. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to remember home. Earth, before the war. Mountains in Colorado where he had trained as a young soldier. The faces of the men and women who had served alongside him in conflicts across a dozen worlds. Sarah, who had been waiting for him when the war started and was probably still waiting now if she was alive. The council had offered Earth a choice: surrender unconditionally and accept integration into their galactic order, or face the consequences of resistance. Humanity had chosen to fight, knowing the odds, knowing the cost. Men and women like Marcus had paid that cost willingly, believing that freedom was worth any price. Now he was here, in a cell designed to break the will of the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. Tomorrow, he would begin a routine that was intended to wear him down mentally and physically until he was ready to confess his crimes and accept execution. The council was patient. They had time. But they had never tried to break anyone quite like Marcus Chen. As the prison's artificial night cycle began, dimming the crystal walls to a soft twilight glow, Marcus began his own routine. Push-ups first, then sit-ups, then a series of exercises designed to maintain muscle tone and flexibility in confined spaces. He moved through the routine with mechanical precision, counting repetitions automatically while his mind worked on other problems. The scratches on the wall, the guard rotation schedule, the sound patterns of the prison systems. The way Peterson's voice had changed when he talked about the cost of serving the council. Every detail was a potential weapon, every observation a piece of intelligence that might someday prove useful. Hours passed. The prison settled into its nighttime rhythm, most of its inhabitants sleeping or whatever passed for sleep among the various species held here. Marcus continued his exercises, then moved to meditation techniques that helped him process the day's events and plan for tomorrow. It was during this meditation that he first heard it. A sound so soft that it might have been imagination, coming from somewhere beyond the walls of his cell. Not the mechanical sounds of the prison's operation, but something organic, something alive. Marcus opened his eyes and listened carefully. There it was again, faint but definitely real, a clicking sound, rhythmic and deliberate. Someone was tapping on something, using a pattern that suggested communication. He moved to the wall where the Thrakari's scratches were most concentrated and pressed his ear against the crystal surface. The sound was clearer here, coming from an adjacent cell. 3 short taps, 3 long ones, 3 short again. Even across species barriers, some patterns were universal. Someone was trying to talk to him. Marcus considered his options. Responding would violate prison regulations and probably result in punishment. Ignoring it was safer but offered no potential advantage. The sound came again, more insistent this time. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. In the ancient human language of Morse code, it spelled out a simple word, SOS. Marcus smiled for the first time since his capture. Apparently, he wasn't the only one in Chronos 7 who wasn't ready to give up the fight. He moved to his small table, picked up the metal cup that held his water ration, and tapped gently against the wall. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Then he waited. The response came immediately, a longer pattern this time, more complex. Marcus listened carefully, translating the ancient code in his head. Slowly, a message formed. Human, MARCUS, CHEN, we have been waiting. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. Curiosity, perhaps. The desire to know what came next. He tapped back, who are you? The reply was immediate. Friends, tomorrow, listen, carefully, THE, silence, SBAKS, LOUDEST. The same phrase Peterson had mentioned, the one left by the Thrakari war leader. Marcus stared at the scratches on the wall with new understanding. They weren't just marks of a desperate prisoner. They were a message, a code, a way for the cell's occupants to communicate with others in the prison. The Thrakari hadn't been trying to escape. He had been organizing. As the prison's night cycle deepened and the crystal walls dimmed to their minimum glow, Marcus Chen began to understand that his war was far from over. Somewhere in the cells around him were others who refused to accept defeat. Others who believed that silence was just another weapon, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Reaper had been captured, but he had not been defeated. And tomorrow, he would begin to learn what that meant in a place like Chronos 7, where the galaxy's most dangerous criminals waited in the dark, planning their own forms of justice. The tapping stopped, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and a growing sense that his greatest mission was about to begin. Marcus woke before the prison's artificial dawn, a habit developed through years of military service and reinforced by 3 months of captivity. The crystal walls of his cell gradually brightened, simulating the sunrise of some distant world. He had no idea what planet Chronos 7 orbited, or even what system it was in. The Council had made sure that information stayed classified. The first lesson of survival in a maximum security facility was routine. Guards expected patterns, and patterns could be exploited. Marcus began each day the same way: exercises, hygiene, meditation. To any observer, he appeared to be settling into the life of a model prisoner. But today was different. At exactly 700 hours, as Marcus finished his morning routine, the tapping began again. This time it came from a different direction, from the cell to his left rather than the one behind him. The pattern was complex, clearly sent by someone with experience in coded communication. Reaper, today, commissary, detail, volunteer. Marcus frowned. Prisoners in Block 7 weren't typically allowed work assignments. The security risk was considered too great, but the message continued. PTRSON, will, ask, say, yes, first, contact, protocol, 7. Before Marcus could respond, his cell door dissolved into motes of light. Peterson stood in the corridor, flanked by 2 Corvan guards whose hands rested on weapons that could stun a charging Thrakari warrior. The human guard's expression was carefully neutral, but Marcus noticed the slight tension around his eyes. "Chen," Peterson said, consulting a data pad, "Administration has a proposal for you." Marcus remained seated on his bed, projecting the calm indifference that had frustrated interrogators across 3-star systems. "I'm listening." "Work detail, commissary duty, light labor, supervised at all times, and it gets you out of this cell for a few hours each day." Peterson's voice carried the tone of someone delivering a routine offer, but his eyes said something different. "Administration thinks it might help with your psychological adjustment to life in the facility." The message from the wall had been accurate. Someone in the prison had access to guard schedules and administrative decisions. That suggested either a corrupted guard or a prisoner with access to the prison's data systems. Either way, it represented an opportunity. "What kind of work?" Marcus asked. "Inventory management. Checking supplies, updating databases, basic maintenance tasks. Nothing that would compromise facility security, obviously." Peterson paused. "You'll be working with other prisoners from various blocks. Low security risks only." Marcus pretended to consider the offer. In reality, he was analyzing Peterson's body language, the positioning of the guards, the subtle environmental cues that might tell him more about what was really happening. After 30 seconds of apparent thought, he nodded. "All right, when do I start?" Peterson's relief was so subtle that most people would have missed it. Marcus didn't miss much. "This morning. Guards will escort you to the commissary in 1 hour. You'll work a 6-hour shift, then return to your cell." After Peterson and the guards left, Marcus returned to the wall where the scratches were most concentrated. He tapped out a brief message. "Understood. Ready." The response came immediately. "Good. Watch 4 Silver Star ON Collar." Marcus spent the next hour going through his normal routine while thinking about silver stars. In human military tradition, they were decorations for valor, but he doubted that's what the message meant. More likely, it was an identification marker, a way to recognize a contact among the commissary workers. The escort arrived precisely on time. 2 guards, 1 human and 1 Zephyrian. They attached neural inhibitor cuffs to Marcus's wrists, devices that would deliver incapacitating shocks if his stress levels rose too high or if he moved outside predetermined parameters. It was technology specifically designed to control human prisoners, refined through months of studying captured soldiers. The commissary was located 3 levels down from Block 7, in a section of the prison that buzzed with activity. Marcus observed everything as they walked: guard positions, security cameras, emergency protocols, the flow of personnel through various checkpoints. Information was ammunition, and he was always gathering ammunition. The commissary itself was a vast warehouse space carved directly from the mountain rock. Shelves reached toward the ceiling, stocked with supplies from across the galaxy. Food, medical equipment, maintenance parts, personal items for prisoners and guards. It was organized with military precision, every item tagged and tracked by automated systems. "Chen, meet your supervisor," the human guard said, indicating a tall, lean figure arranging supply crates near the main entrance. "Zara 97, this is your new worker." Marcus looked at his supervisor and immediately understood the message about the Silver Star. The being before him was unlike any species he had encountered before. Roughly humanoid but clearly not human, with pale blue skin and large, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. And there, barely visible on the collar of her work uniform, was a small silver star. "Welcome, Marcus Chen," she said in accented but clear English. Her voice carried harmonics that suggested she could communicate across multiple frequencies. "I am Zara. I will show you your duties." As they walked deeper into the commissary, away from the guards' immediate attention, Zara spoke in a lower voice. "You are famous among the prisoners here, the human who brought the Galactic Council to its knees." "I lost," Marcus said simply. "You fought. That is more than most of us managed." Zara led him to a section of shelving that contained electronic components and small mechanical parts. "Your job today is to inventory these items. Very boring work, very routine." She handed him a data pad and a scanning device. To any observer, it would look like standard warehouse work. But as Marcus began scanning items, he noticed that certain components were grouped together in ways that suggested they weren't meant for routine maintenance. "How many others are there?" he asked quietly as he worked. 43 in total, spread across all blocks of the prison. We represent 12 different species, all convicted of crimes against the Council. Zara's expression hardened. "Some of us were criminals before the Council rose to power. Others became criminals when they decided to fight back." Marcus scanned a component that looked suspiciously like part of a communication device. "What's the goal?" "Survival for now. The Council executes political prisoners in groups, usually once every 6 months. The next execution date is in 37 days. Zara moved to a different section of shelving, keeping her voice casual. 49 prisoners are scheduled to die. 6 of them are human." That got Marcus's attention. He had assumed he was the only human in Chronos 7, but apparently the Council had been busy. "What humans?" "Soldiers mostly. A few civilians who were caught providing aid to resistance movements. One scientist who refused to share research with Council authorities." Zara paused in her work. "They're kept in Block 3. Different security level but same ultimate fate." Marcus processed this information while continuing his inventory work. The existence of other human prisoners changed the tactical situation significantly. Any escape plan would need to account for them, which increased the complexity exponentially. But it also provided additional resources, people who understood human military doctrine and techniques. "How do you communicate between blocks?" he asked. Zara smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. The Council designed Chronos 7 to be escape-proof, but they made one crucial mistake. They assumed that imprisoned criminals would not cooperate across species barriers. She led him to a maintenance panel on the far wall, one of dozens scattered throughout the commissary. To a casual observer, she appeared to be checking routine systems. But Marcus noticed that her fingers moved in a specific pattern on the control surface. And after a moment, the panel displayed information that had nothing to do with warehouse inventory. "The prison's communication systems are integrated," Zara explained, keeping her voice barely above a whisper. "Emergency channels, maintenance networks, guard communications. If you know the right frequencies and protocols, you can piggyback messages on regular system traffic. The display showed a schematic of the prison's internal layout, far more detailed than anything Marcus had been able to observe during his transfer. Block 7 was at the top of the mountain, with progressively less secure blocks descending toward the base. Transport bays, guard quarters, administrative offices, and something labeled Special Projects Division that caught his attention. "What special projects?" he asked. Zara's expression darkened. "Where they keep the experiments. Prisoners who volunteer for medical testing, weapons development, psychological research. The Council is very interested in learning how different species respond to various stimuli." Before Marcus could ask more questions, the sound of approaching footsteps caused Zara to quickly close the display and return to routine inventory work. A Thrakari guard appeared around the corner, compound eyes scanning the area with mechanical precision. "Status report," the guard clicked in accented standard. "Inventory proceeding normally," Zara replied. "New worker is adapting well to procedures." The guard's attention fixed on Marcus for several seconds, analyzing his posture, breathing, facial expression. Apparently satisfied, it clicked acknowledgement and moved on to inspect other areas of the commissary. "They monitor everything," Zara said once the guard was out of earshot. "Biometric scanners, behavioral analysis, even chemical sensors that can detect changes in body chemistry. But they don't monitor us quite as closely as Block 7 prisoners." Marcus continued working, but his mind was racing. The existence of a communication network, other human prisoners, and detailed intelligence about the prison's layout changed everything. What had seemed like a death sentence was beginning to look more like a tactical challenge. "The execution schedule," he said, "is it fixed?" "Not entirely. The Council prefers symbolic dates, anniversaries of their victories, or important political events, but they can accelerate the timeline if they perceive a security threat. And they would perceive an escape attempt as a security threat." Obviously, Zara moved to another section of shelving, Marcus following, which is why any action would need to be decisive. No second chances, no partial success. They worked in silence for several minutes while Marcus digested this information. The tactical situation was becoming clearer, but it was also becoming more complex. Any escape plan would need to account for multiple variables: 43 prisoners across different security levels, sophisticated monitoring systems, and a 37-day timeline before executions began. But Marcus had planned and executed operations under worse conditions. The key was breaking the problem down into manageable components and building solutions step by step. "The other humans," he said, "are any of them military?" 3. A Navy pilot who destroyed a Council cruiser before being captured. A Marine officer who led resistance operations on Europa. And a special operations soldier whose file is so classified that even the guards don't know his full background. Marcus felt a spark of professional interest. Special operations soldiers were trained to think creatively, to find solutions where none seemed to exist. Having that kind of resource in the prisoner population was significant. "I need to make contact with them." Possible, but risky. Cross-block communication is monitored more heavily than internal communications, and moving between blocks requires special authorization. "What about during transport? Medical appointments, disciplinary hearings, administrative meetings?" Zara considered this. Medical is possible. The prison's health center serves all blocks, but faking an injury severe enough to require treatment would mean subjecting yourself to Council medical procedures. Their healing technology is effective, but they're not particularly concerned about patient comfort. Marcus almost smiled at that. He had endured Council interrogation techniques that made their medical procedures look like luxury spa treatments. Physical discomfort was just another factor to be managed. "How would I arrange a medical appointment?" report symptoms that suggest potential contagious disease. The Council is paranoid about biological contamination, especially from human diseases they haven't studied. They'll isolate you immediately and run extensive tests. Before Marcus could respond, the comm system in the commissary crackled to life with an announcement in multiple languages. Marcus caught the English version. "Attention all personnel. Security drill beginning in 5 minutes. All prisoners return to assigned work positions. All guards implement Protocol 7." Zara moved quickly to shut down the maintenance panel and return their work area to normal appearance. Drill means inspection. They'll scan everything, check all systems, verify prisoner locations. Marcus filed that information away. Security drills provided intelligence about guard procedures and response times, but they also meant increased scrutiny for the next several hours. Any irregular activity would be noticed and investigated. "End of first contact," Zara said in a normal voice as guards began moving through the commissary. "Return to Block 7. Resume tomorrow if approved." The escort arrived within minutes, the same human and Zephyrian guards who had brought him down. They attached the neural inhibitor cuffs and began the journey back to his cell, following the same route they had used that morning. But Marcus paid attention to details his escorts might miss: the timing of guard rotations, the locations of security cameras, the sounds coming from other parts of the prison during the drill. Information that seemed irrelevant now might become crucial later. Back in his cell, Marcus settled into his evening routine while processing everything he had learned. 43 prisoners in a resistance network, detailed intelligence about prison systems, other humans who might be allies or resources, and a 37-day timeline before executions began. The Council had made a mistake bringing him to Chronos 7. They thought they were removing a dangerous individual from the battlefield, but they had actually introduced him to a new theater of operations. One where the rules were different but the objective remained the same: make the enemy pay a price they couldn't afford. As the prison's artificial night cycle began, Marcus returned to the wall where the Thrakari's scratches marked the crystalline surface. He tapped out a message: "Contact made, ready for next phase." The response came from the cell behind him, the same one that had made first contact. "Good. Tomorrow, medical, protocol 13. Prepare." Marcus smiled in the darkness of his cell. Protocol 13, whatever it was, sounded like the next step in a plan that had been months or even years in the making. The Council thought they had captured the galaxy's most dangerous criminals and locked them away where they could do no harm. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Outside his cell, Chronos 7 continued its eternal vigil, monitoring and controlling the beings within its walls. But deep in the mountain's heart, in cells scattered across multiple security blocks, 43 prisoners were preparing for a war that the Galactic Council couldn't imagine. The Reaper had found his army. Marcus began exhibiting symptoms at 300 hours, timing calculated to coincide with the night shift's minimum staffing levels. The symptoms were convincing because they were real: elevated temperature, rapid heartbeat, respiratory distress. A human body could manufacture these responses through controlled stress techniques, but maintaining them required discipline that few people possessed. By 400, automated monitoring systems had detected the anomalies and flagged them for medical review. By 4:30, human guards were at his cell door with portable scanners that confirmed what the fixed sensors had already reported. Marcus Chen appeared to be developing a severe illness of unknown origin. "Medical emergency, Block 7, the duty sergeant reported into his comm unit. "Prisoner 77 Alpha showing signs of potential systemic infection." The response was immediate and predictable. The Council had studied human biology extensively during the war, but they had also learned to fear human diseases that their systems couldn't immediately identify. Earth's biosphere had produced pathogens that could jump species barriers in ways that galactic medicine struggled to predict. Marcus was transferred to the medical bay within 20 minutes, transported in a containment unit that isolated him from guards and other prisoners. Through the unit's transparent walls, he observed everything: corridor layouts, security checkpoints, the locations of emergency systems. Every detail was filed away for future use. The medical bay occupied an entire level of Chronos 7, a complex of laboratories, treatment rooms, and isolation chambers that could handle everything from routine injuries to exotic diseases. It was also one of the few places where prisoners from different blocks might encounter each other under legitimate circumstances. Dr. Varric, the facility's chief medical officer, was a Zephyrian with the tall, ethereal build characteristic of his species. His four arms moved with practiced efficiency as he reviewed Marcus's scans, each hand operating different instruments simultaneously. When he spoke, his voice carried the harmonic complexity that marked highly educated members of his race. "Fascinating," Dr. Varric said, studying the biometric readings. "Human physiology continues to surprise us. These symptoms suggest a viral infection, but our scans detect no viral agents in your system." Marcus lay on the examination table, maintaining the appearance of illness while actually gathering intelligence. The medical bay was less heavily monitored than the cell blocks, relying more on physical barriers and professional oversight than electronic surveillance. It was exactly the kind of environment where information could be exchanged. "We'll need to run comprehensive tests," Dr. Varric continued. "Blood work, tissue samples, neurological scans. If this is a new human pathogen, the Council will want detailed documentation." Over the next 4 hours, Marcus was subjected to examinations that would have been impossible with normal human medical technology. Scanners that could map individual cells, instruments that analyzed his genetic structure in real time, devices that monitored brain activity at the molecular level. It was uncomfortable but not painful, and it served his purposes perfectly. During a break between procedures, while Dr. Varric analyzed preliminary results, Marcus was left in an isolation chamber adjacent to the main laboratory. The chamber was designed to contain dangerous biological agents, with multiple layers of containment and sophisticated air filtration systems. But it also had something valuable: a maintenance access panel. Marcus had noticed that Zara's technique in the commissary involved accessing maintenance systems through panels that appeared routine. The medical bay would have similar systems, and they would be connected to the same integrated network that allowed communication between blocks. Working carefully to avoid detection by the chamber's sensors, Marcus accessed the panel using techniques learned during special operations training. Electronic systems were systems, whether they were built by humans or aliens, and systems always had backdoors for maintenance and emergency access. The panel's display came alive with information that confirmed what Zara had told him. The prison's communication network was indeed integrated, with emergency channels that connected every level of the facility. More importantly, the medical bay's systems included real-time patient tracking that showed the locations of all individuals currently receiving treatment. 2 floors down in the general medical ward, 3 human prisoners were receiving routine examinations. Their identities were listed in the system: Lieutenant Sarah Reeves, Navy pilot; Captain James Harrison, Marine officer; and someone listed only as classified special authorization required. Marcus memorized their locations and the timing of their appointments, then carefully closed the access panel and returned to his position on the examination table. When Dr. Varric returned with test results, Marcus appeared to be exactly where he had been left. "Your condition is stabilizing," the doctor announced, reviewing his instruments. "Whatever caused these symptoms appears to be resolving on its own. However, We'll need to monitor you for another 12 hours to ensure there's no relapse. 12 hours in the medical bay meant 12 hours of opportunity. Marcus nodded weakly, maintaining his appearance of illness while his mind worked on the tactical possibilities. "Doctor," he said, his voice carefully modulated to suggest weakness and concern, "is this something that could spread to other prisoners? I wouldn't want to cause an outbreak." Dr. Varick's expression showed approval at what he interpreted as responsible concern for others. "We're monitoring that possibility carefully. If necessary, we'll extend testing to other humans in the facility." Perfect. Marcus had just provided justification for the medical staff to examine the other human prisoners, creating opportunities for contact that would appear completely legitimate. As the day progressed, Marcus observed the medical bay's routines while maintaining his cover. Staff rotations occurred every 8 hours, with skeleton crews during night shifts. Security was lighter than in the cell blocks, relying more on the assumption that sick prisoners were not escape risks. Emergency procedures were practiced but clearly hadn't been tested under real crisis conditions. At 1400 hours, the first of the other human prisoners arrived for examination. Lieutenant Sarah Reeves was escorted into the ward by 2 guards who remained outside her treatment room. Through the isolation chamber's viewing panel, Marcus could see her clearly. Mid-30s, athletic build maintained despite months of confinement, and the bearing of someone who hadn't given up the fight. Dr. Varick explained to her that they were conducting precautionary scans due to a potential biological contamination event. It was routine procedure, he assured her, nothing to be concerned about. But Marcus noticed that she studied the medical equipment with the same professional attention he had given to the security systems. During Lieutenant Reeves's examination, Marcus used the maintenance panel again to access the ward's communication system. The medical bay used internal channels to coordinate between treatment rooms, channels that could be accessed if you knew the right frequencies and protocols. Working quickly, he input a message using the same code patterns that had been used to contact him in his cell. "Reaper, here, medical, bay, isolation, chamber, 3. The response came within minutes, not from Lieutenant Reeves but from the unidentified Special Operations soldier. "Understood. Protocol 15. Tonight, 200. Protocol 15. Marcus filed that away and closed the connection just as Dr. Varick returned to check on his condition. The timing had been perfect, but it also meant that the prisoner network was more sophisticated than he had initially realized. Someone was coordinating these protocols, managing information flow, and maintaining operational security under conditions that should have made organization impossible. Captain Harrison arrived for his examination at 1600 hours and Marcus repeated the communication process. The Marine officer's response was immediate and professional, ready to assist, awaiting orders. The third prisoner, the classified Special Operations soldier, arrived at 1800 hours under escort that was noticeably heavier than the others. 4 guards instead of 2, neural inhibitor cuffs that were more sophisticated than standard equipment, and biometric monitoring that suggested this individual was considered extremely dangerous even by Chronos 7 standards. Marcus couldn't see this prisoner directly from his isolation chamber, but the communication network provided information that the facility's normal security systems couldn't. The man's identity remained classified even in the medical records, but his response to Marcus's contact message was immediate and telling. Wolf Pack Leader REQSTS, Immediate Tactical Briefing, Protocol, Alpha. Wolf Pack Leader. Marcus felt a surge of recognition. During the war with the Council, there had been rumors of a special operations unit that didn't officially exist, soldiers who operated so far behind enemy lines that they became legends. If one of those operators was in Chronos 7, the tactical situation had just improved dramatically. As evening approached and the medical bay shifted to night operations, Marcus prepared for whatever Protocol 15 involved. The day had provided crucial intelligence, contact with 3 other human prisoners, access to the prison's communication networks, and confirmation that the prisoner resistance was far more organized than the council suspected. Dr. Varick made a final check on Marcus's condition at 2,000 hours. "Your symptoms have completely resolved," he announced with satisfaction. "However, I want to keep you under observation for another 6 hours as a precaution. You'll be returned to your cell first thing in the morning." Marcus nodded gratefully, playing the role of a relieved patient. 6 more hours was exactly what he needed. At 200 hours, when the medical bay was operating with minimal staff, and most of the facility was in night mode, Protocol 15 began. The lights in Marcus's isolation chamber dimmed to emergency levels, apparently due to a routine power conservation cycle. But within minutes, the chamber's door lock disengaged with a soft click that was barely audible over the hum of life support systems. Marcus remained perfectly still, listening carefully to determine if this was a test or an opportunity. After 30 seconds of silence, he heard the faint sound of movement in the corridor outside. Someone was out there, moving with the careful precision of a trained soldier. The isolation chamber door opened just wide enough for a figure to slip inside. In the emergency lighting, Marcus could make out the silhouette of a woman in medical scrubs, but her movement patterns immediately identified her as one of the human prisoners. "Lieutenant Reeves," she said softly, confirming his guess. "Protocol 15 is movement window. We have 12 minutes before the next security sweep." Marcus sat up on the examination table, his supposed illness forgotten. "How many others?" "Captain Harrison is securing the corridor. Our classified friend is handling communications, and we have 2 non-human allies providing overwatch." Reeves moved to the chamber's maintenance panel and began working on it with practiced efficiency. "This is intelligence gathering only. We're not ready for action yet." Through the panel, Reeves accessed files that Marcus hadn't been able to reach during his earlier attempts. Detailed schematics of the entire prison complex, guard rotation schedules, transportation patterns, and something labeled Executive Action Timetable. "The executions," she explained, nodding his interest in the last file. "Originally scheduled for 37 days from now, but they've been moved up. New date is 18 days. Marcus felt a cold surge of tactical calculation. 18 days to plan and execute an operation that would need to extract multiple prisoners from different security blocks of the galaxy's most secure facility. The timeline was tight, but not impossible. "What triggered the change?" he asked. "Political pressure from the Council's member worlds. Apparently, keeping high-profile prisoners alive is seen as a sign of weakness. They want public executions to demonstrate their power." The intelligence briefing continued for another 8 minutes, with Reeves sharing information that had been gathered over months of careful observation. Structural weaknesses in the prison's design, patterns in guard behavior, resources available within the prisoner population. It was a professional military assessment, exactly what Marcus would have expected from a Navy pilot who had survived this long. "Bottom line," Reeves concluded, "we have the intelligence and the personnel to attempt an escape, but we need leadership, someone who can coordinate multiple moving parts under extreme pressure." Marcus understood what she wasn't saying directly. The prisoners had been planning and preparing, but they needed someone with the experience to turn their preparation into action. Someone who had planned operations against impossible odds and succeeded. "What about security for this meeting?" he asked. "Zara is monitoring the guard stations. Harrison has the corridor approaches covered. Our special operations friend is running electronic warfare against the surveillance systems." Reeves checked a small device on her wrist. "We have 2 more minutes." Marcus made his decision. Tell everyone we meet again tomorrow night. Same time, same protocols. I'll have a preliminary tactical assessment ready." Reeves nodded and moved toward the chamber door. "One more thing. The Council is bringing in special observers for the executions. High-ranking officials from multiple species, military commanders, political leaders. They want the galaxy to watch humanity die." She was gone before Marcus could respond, slipping out of the chamber as silently as she had entered. Within seconds, the door locked automatically and the lighting returned to normal levels. To any observer, nothing had happened. Marcus was still a sick prisoner recovering from a mysterious illness. But everything had changed. As Marcus lay back on the examination table and resumed his cover as a patient, his mind was already working on the tactical problem. 18 days to plan an escape that would need to account for multiple variables, including the presence of high-ranking council observers who would bring additional security measures. The council thought they were about to demonstrate their power by executing the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. Instead, they were about to learn why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous enemies. The Reaper had found his pack, and they were ready to hunt. Marcus returned to his cell the following morning with a clean bill of health and a complete tactical assessment forming in his mind. Dr. Varric had been pleased to report that whatever mysterious illness had affected the human prisoner had resolved completely, leaving no trace in his system. The medical bay's sophisticated scanners showed normal readings across all parameters. What the scanners couldn't detect was that Marcus now possessed detailed intelligence about Chronos 7's internal systems, guard rotations, and prisoner resources. More importantly, he had established contact with a network of highly trained individuals who had spent months preparing for exactly this kind of operation. Back in Block 7, Marcus resumed his normal routine while using the wall communication system to coordinate with other elements of the prisoner network. The scratches left by the Thrakari war leader had revealed themselves to be a sophisticated code system, one that allowed complex messages to be transmitted through seemingly random patterns. Medical contact. Successful. Marcus tapped against the crystal wall. Timeline 18 days. Prepare. Alpha. PROTOCOLS. The response came from multiple directions, indicating that several cells in Block 7 were part of the network. Each message was brief, professional, and spoke to careful preparation. Understood. MATRILS. Ready. Guard. PATTRNS. Confirmed. External. ASSETS. Standing by. That last message intrigued Marcus. External assets suggested that the prisoner network had resources outside Chronos 7, allies who could provide support during an escape attempt. It was a level of organization that spoke to months or even years of planning. Later that morning, Peterson arrived for Marcus's routine escort to commissary duty. The human guard's expression was carefully neutral, but Marcus noticed subtle signs of tension. Whatever was happening within the prison, it was affecting the guards as well as the prisoners. "Busy night in the medical bay," Peterson commented as they walked toward the commissary. Dr. Varric reported some kind of contamination scare. All the human prisoners had to be examined. Marcus nodded noncommittally. Better safe than sorry with unknown diseases. Funny thing, though, our sensors didn't detect any actual contamination. No biological agents, no viral particles, nothing that would explain your symptoms. Peterson's voice carried a note of suspicion, almost like the whole thing was psychosomatic. "The human body does strange things under stress," Marcus replied. "Confinement, uncertainty about the future, isolation from other humans. It takes a toll." They reached the commissary without further conversation, but Marcus filed away Peterson's suspicions. The guard was more observant than his casual manner suggested, and he was clearly beginning to suspect that the medical incident had been staged. That would mean increased scrutiny, but it also provided useful intelligence about guard awareness levels. Zara was waiting with another inventory assignment, this time focusing on electronic components that were even more obviously not intended for routine maintenance. As they worked, she provided updates on the network's activities. 18 days, she said quietly, scanning a device that looked suspiciously like part of a communication array. The timeline is tight but manageable. We've been preparing for this possibility since the executions were first announced. Marcus continued his own scanning while processing this information. What kind of preparation? Resource accumulation, intelligence gathering, contact with external allies. Zara moved to a section of shelving that contained what appeared to be medical supplies. The Council assumes that prisoners are too closely monitored to organize effectively. They've underestimated how determined beings become when faced with extinction. External allies. Resistance movements on Council member worlds. Sympathizers within their own military structure. Political factions that oppose the current leadership. Zara's expression was grim. The Council's victory over humanity was complete, but it was also traumatic for many species. They're discovering that ruling through fear has consequences. Marcus absorbed this while examining a component that was definitely part of a weapons system. The prisoner network wasn't just planning an escape. They were part of a larger resistance movement that spanned multiple star systems. The implications were staggering. "What's the strategic objective?" he asked. "Initially, just survival. Get the condemned prisoners away from Chronos 7 before the executions." Zara paused in her work. But the presence of Council observers at the execution creates additional opportunities. Marcus felt his tactical instincts engage. High-value targets, concentrated in one location, during an operation they believed was completely under their control. It was the kind of opportunity that could shift the balance of an entire conflict. How many observers? 47 confirmed with their security details. Representatives from every Council member species, plus military commanders and political officials. Zara's voice carried a note of satisfaction. They're turning the execution into a celebration of their power. Security arrangements. Extensive but predictable. The Council relies on technology and overwhelming force rather than tactical creativity. They'll assume that prisoners in maximum security confinement pose no threat to heavily guarded VIPs. Marcus smiled grimly. That assumption had gotten the Council into trouble before. During the war, their forces had consistently underestimated human tactical innovation, leading to defeats that should have been impossible given their technological advantages. They worked in silence for several minutes while Marcus considered the tactical possibilities. An escape operation was one thing. An attack on high-value targets was something else entirely. It would require resources, coordination, and timing that pushed the limits of what was possible under current conditions. But Marcus had succeeded at impossible missions before. "The Special Operations Prisoner," he said. "What do you know about him?" "Classified above our access level, but based on his security profile and the reaction he generates from guards, he's someone the Council considers extremely dangerous." Zara lowered her voice even further. "Rumor is that he was part of a unit that operated so far behind Council lines that they were presumed dead for months." Wolf Pack. Marcus was increasingly certain that the classified prisoner was part of the legendary Special Operations Unit that had caused so much havoc during the war. If so, they had resources and capabilities that went far beyond normal military training. "I need direct contact with him." "Possible, but it would require another medical event. And after yesterday's contamination scare, the medical staff will be more suspicious of symptoms that can't be verified." Marcus considered this. Creating a second medical emergency so soon after the first would indeed raise suspicions. But there were other ways to arrange contact, methods that would appear completely routine to casual observation. What about work assignments? Are there other details that involve multiple blocks? Maintenance work sometimes requires personnel from different security levels, and there's always the possibility of disciplinary hearings, administrative meetings, special projects. Zara paused meaningfully. The Special Projects Division is particularly interesting. Marcus remembered seeing that label on the prison schematics during his medical bay infiltration. What kind of projects? Officially, research into prisoner rehabilitation techniques. Unofficially, weapons testing, psychological experiments, and other activities that the Council prefers to keep classified. Zara's expression hardened. They're always looking for volunteers, and the volunteers rarely return to general population. But they do get access to other parts of the prison. Exactly. And the Special Projects Division has the lowest security monitoring in the entire facility. They assume that volunteers are cooperating willingly. Marcus filed this away as another tactical option. Volunteering for special projects would provide access and mobility, but it would also mean subjecting himself to unknown procedures. It was a calculated risk, but one that might be necessary. The rest of his shift passed quietly, with Marcus and Zara maintaining the appearance of routine inventory work while actually cataloging resources that could be useful during an escape attempt. By the time his escort arrived to return him to Block 7, Marcus had a clearer picture of what was possible. That evening, as the prison settled into its night cycle, Marcus used the wall communication system to contact the network's leadership. The responses confirmed what he had suspected. They had been waiting for someone with his experience to take operational command. "Reaper ready for command briefing," came the message from the cell behind him. "Affirmative, tonight 300 Protocol 7. Protocol 7 turned out to be a full leadership meeting, conducted through the wall communication system with participants from across multiple blocks. Marcus was impressed by the sophistication of the operation. Messages flowed through the network with military precision, each participant identified by call signs that suggested extensive operational experience. "Wolf Pack Leader Standing By" came from the Special Operations prisoner. "Horizon Actual Ready" from Lieutenant Reeves. "Thunder 6 ACKNOWLEDGES" from Captain Harrison. And from Zara, identifying herself for the first time with a military designation, Shadow 7 Online. Marcus realized that he was coordinating with professional soldiers and resistance operatives, not just desperate prisoners. Each of these individuals had been part of significant operations against the Council, and their capture hadn't diminished their capabilities. "Reaper Actual assumes command," he transmitted. "Mission PARAMETRS require reassessment." Over the next hour, using the sophisticated code system developed by the Thrakari war leader, Marcus received detailed briefings on every aspect of the planned operation. Resources available, external support confirmed, guard vulnerabilities identified, and contingency plans for dozens of possible complications. But the more he learned, the more convinced he became that a simple escape wasn't the right objective. The presence of Council observers created an opportunity that might not come again for years. Instead of running from their enemies, they could strike back in a way that would resonate across the galaxy. "Mission revision," Marcus transmitted. "Primary objective updated." The network fell silent, waiting for his assessment. "Council observers, ARE, high value, TARGTS, escape, secondary, 2, strategic, impact." The responses came back immediately, and they were exactly what Marcus had hoped to see. "Wolf Pack, CONCURS, elimination preferred." "Horizon agrees maximum damage." "Thunder SUPPORTS, tactical revision." Shadow, CONFRMS, external, ASSETS, capable. Marcus smiled in the darkness of his cell. The council had made a crucial mistake when they decided to turn the execution into a public demonstration of their power. They were bringing their most important leaders to the one place where their most dangerous enemies were concentrated. Timeline ACCLERATED, Marcus transmitted. Operation Green Light, IN 12 days. 12 days to turn a desperate escape attempt into a surgical strike against the highest levels of galactic government. It would require everything they had learned, every resource they could gather, and coordination that would push their network to its absolute limits. But Marcus Chen had built his reputation on impossible missions, and this time he wouldn't be working alone. The Council wanted to show the galaxy what happened to those who opposed their rule. Instead, they were about to learn why humanity had never accepted defeat, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The Reaper was ready to lead his pack into battle one more time. 12 days later, Chronos 7 buzzed with preparations for the most significant executions in galactic history. Council observers had been arriving throughout the week, each delegation accompanied by security details that transformed the prison into an armed camp. The facility's normal routines were disrupted as additional guards, surveillance equipment, and defensive systems were brought online. Marcus observed everything from his cell in Block 7, using the communication network to coordinate intelligence gathering across all levels of the prison. The operation they had planned was audacious beyond anything attempted in the facility's history, but the presence of so many high-value targets made the risk worthwhile. Final count, he tapped against the wall, 47 observers plus security. The responses came back from across the network, confirming what they had spent days preparing. Explosive, DVICES, POSITIONED, from Zara and the commissary. Communication, jammers, ready, from Wolf Pack Leader in Special Projects. External, ASSETS, IN, position, from Lieutenant Reeves in the medical bay. Transport, SECURED, from Captain Harrison in maintenance. Marcus had to admire the sophistication of the plan that had emerged from their collective experience. Rather than a simple escape attempt, they had designed a coordinated attack that would eliminate the Council's leadership while creating enough chaos to allow multiple prisoner groups to reach extraction points. The key had been understanding the prison's design philosophy. Chronos 7 was built to prevent escape, not to withstand attack from within. Its security systems were oriented outward, assuming that prisoners were contained rather than organized. The Council's arrogance had become their weakness. At 800 hours, Peterson arrived for Marcus's final escort to commissary duty. The human guard's expression was tense, and Marcus noticed that he was accompanied by additional security. The entire facility was on high alert, but that would work in their favor. Heightened security meant predictable responses, and predictable responses could be exploited. "Big day today," Peterson commented as they walked through corridors bustling with activity. "The Council's finest coming to watch justice being served." Marcus nodded noncommittally. Justice is an interesting concept. Different species probably have different definitions. Maybe, but some things are universal. Actions have consequences, and those consequences catch up with you eventually. There was something in Peterson's tone that caught Marcus's attention. The guard seemed to be sending a message, though it was carefully coded in casual conversation. After months of observation, Marcus had developed a sense for when people were saying more than their words indicated. "That's true," Marcus replied carefully. "Sometimes the consequences are different than people expect." Peterson's slight nod confirmed that they were having a conversation beneath the conversation. Whatever was about to happen, the human guard was aware of it and potentially sympathetic. That was useful intelligence, but also a complication. Peterson's involvement could either help or hinder their operation, depending on how it developed. The commissary was a hive of activity as staff prepared supplies for the execution ceremony. Marcus was assigned to inventory work in a section that contained ceremonial items, banners, recording equipment, and formal decorations that would transform the prison's execution chamber into a symbol of council power. But hidden among the ceremonial supplies were components that Zara and her allies had carefully positioned over weeks of preparation, explosive devices disguised as decorative elements, communication jammers built into recording equipment, weapons components that could be assembled quickly when the time came. "Everything is in position," Zara said quietly as they worked together to arrange the supplies. "External assets report that Council transport ships are vulnerable to coordinated attack once their shields are down." Marcus continued his inventory work while processing this information. The plan had multiple phases, each designed to support the others. Phase 1 would eliminate the observers and their immediate security. Phase 2 would take control of critical prison systems. Phase 3 would open escape routes for prisoners while ensuring that the Council's response was delayed and confused. But Marcus had added a Phase 4 that only he and Wolf, pack leader, knew about. While the other prisoners escaped, he and the Special Operations soldier would ensure that the Council's most important leaders never left Chrono 7 alive. "Signal timing?" Marcus asked. 1400 hours. The execution ceremony begins with formal statements from each observer delegation. They'll all be in the chamber, security will be focused on perimeter defense, and our people will be in position throughout the facility. Marcus checked his internal chronometer. 6 hours to final execution. By 1500 hours, either they would all be dead or the balance of power in the galaxy would have shifted permanently. The morning passed with agonizing slowness as final preparations were completed. Marcus maintained his cover as a routine inventory worker, while actually coordinating the most complex operation ever attempted within a maximum security facility. Messages flowed through the wall communication system, confirming that each element was ready. At 1200 hours, Peterson arrived to escort Marcus back to his cell for the final time. The guard's expression was carefully controlled, but Marcus noticed the slight tremor in his hands and the way his eyes avoided direct contact. Peterson knew something was about to happen, and he was struggling with whatever role he had chosen to play. "Chen," Peterson said as they reached Block 7, "I want you to know that not all humans who survived the war are proud of the choices they made." Marcus looked at the guard with new understanding. Peterson wasn't just sympathetic to their cause, he was an active participant. The human guard had been providing intelligence, facilitating communications, and preparing to play a direct role in the operation. "Some choices are harder than others," Marcus replied, "but in the end you have to be able to live with yourself." Peterson nodded and opened Marcus's cell door. 1400 hours, he said quietly. "Block 7 security will experience a system malfunction at exactly 1400 hours." The door sealed, leaving Marcus alone for the final phase of preparation. He used the wall communication system to send final confirmation to all elements of the network. "Reaper, actual, all stations, execute AT-1400, HOURS, exact." The responses came back immediately, confirming readiness across the entire operation. "Wolf pack ready. Horizon standing by. Thunder prepared. Shadow confirmed." At 1400 hours exactly, the lights in Block 7 flickered and died. Emergency illumination came online immediately, bathing the corridor in red light that made everything look like it was covered in blood. Somewhere in the prison's depths, alarms began to sound as automated systems detected failures in multiple critical networks. Marcus's cell door dissolved into sparkling motes of light as Peterson's Promise system malfunction freed every prisoner in Block 7 simultaneously. But Marcus was ready, moving with the fluid precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment in his mind dozens of times. The corridor erupted into controlled chaos as prisoners emerged from their cells, each one following preassigned routes toward objectives that had been planned with military precision. These weren't desperate criminals making random escape attempts. They were disciplined soldiers executing a coordinated assault. Marcus reached the maintenance shaft that would take him to the execution chamber just as the first explosions echoed through the prison. Phase 1 had begun, with devices hidden throughout the ceremony area, eliminating guards and creating barriers that would trap the council observers in a confined space with no escape routes. The maintenance shaft was a tight fit, but Marcus had maintained his physical conditioning throughout his imprisonment. He moved through the cramped space with efficiency born of special operations training, navigating by memory of schematics he had memorized during his medical bay infiltration. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of battle as other prisoners fought their way toward their assigned objectives. The plan was working, but success would depend on precise timing and flawless execution under extreme pressure. Marcus emerged from the maintenance shaft in a storage chamber adjacent to the execution theater. Through the chamber's viewing panel, he could see the ceremony area where council observers had gathered to witness what they believed would be humanity's final humiliation. The scene was exactly what he had expected. 47 of the galaxy's most powerful beings, seated in a semicircle around the execution platform where condemned prisoners would be brought for public elimination. Their security details were positioned around the chamber's perimeter, watching for external threats that would never materialize. Wolf Pack Leader was already in position, having reached the chamber through a different route. The classified special operations soldier moved with the same deadly efficiency that Marcus remembered from his own training, placing charges with surgical precision while avoiding detection by increasingly desperate guards. Phase 2, Wolf Pack Leader said quietly into a communication device that Zara had provided. Taking control now. The prison's communication systems went down as jammers throughout the facility activated simultaneously. Emergency lighting failed as power distribution networks were severed. Atmospheric controls shut down, creating an environment where panic would spread faster than security responses. Phase 3 began as escape routes opened throughout Chronos 7. Prisoners who had been condemned to die fought their way toward freedom, supported by external allies who had been waiting for exactly this moment. Transport ships that had been disguised as routine supply vessels revealed themselves as rescue craft, their weapons targeting the council ships that had brought the observers. But Marcus was focused on Phase 4. The execution chamber's main doors sealed as the facility's security systems tried to protect the council observers from the chaos spreading through the prison. But the observers were no longer the ones being protected. They were the targets. Marcus and Wolf Pack Leader moved with synchronized precision, each taking one side of the chamber while the council's finest realized that their moment of triumph had become their moment of doom. Security guards turned their weapons toward the infiltrators, but they were trained to fight external threats, not enemies who had already penetrated their defenses. The battle was brief and decisive. Marcus and Wolf Pack Leader had spent their entire adult lives preparing for moments exactly like this, fighting against impossible odds with nothing but skill, determination, and absolute commitment to their mission. The council observers, for all their power and authority, had no experience with the kind of warfare that humans had perfected during their struggle for survival. When the shooting stopped, 47 of the galaxy's most important leaders lay dead in a chamber that had been designed to demonstrate their invincibility. Reaper Actual, Wolfpack Leader said, his voice carrying satisfaction that came from a job perfectly executed. Primary objectives eliminated. Secondary objectives achieved. Phase 4 complete. Marcus keyed his own communication device, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach every corner of the galaxy. Council leadership eliminated. Human prisoners extracted. Kronos 7 compromised. The war continues. As they made their way toward the extraction point, where their own transport waited, Marcus reflected on what they had accomplished. The Council had believed that capturing and executing their enemies would demonstrate the futility of resistance. Instead, they had created the opportunity for their most dangerous opponents to strike back in a way that would resonate throughout known space. The transport ship that lifted them away from Kronos 7 carried 43 former prisoners who were now free to continue their fight against Council oppression. But more importantly, it carried proof that no prison could hold the human spirit, and no enemy was too powerful to be defeated by those who refused to surrender. As they entered hyperspace and left the burning wreckage of the galaxy's most secure facility behind them, Marcus Chen smiled grimly. The Council had called him the Reaper, thinking the name referred to his ability to kill their soldiers and leaders. They had been wrong. The Reaper didn't just harvest the living. He harvested hope from despair, victory from defeat, and freedom from the chains that tyrants used to bind the galaxy. The war was far from over, but now the Council would learn what it meant to face an enemy that could strike from anywhere, anytime, with the precision and determination that had made humanity the galaxy's most feared opponents. The Reaper was free, and his pack was ready to hunt across the stars.